Hi, welcome to Spiritual Connection. I'm your host, Katie Augustyn. So I'm an energy healer, I'm a transformation coach, I'm a shamanic practitioner, and I'm a spiritual leader. And you know, connection is really one of my core values. It shows up in many areas of my life. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to start the show, Spiritual Connection. You know, it's about connecting with each other, as well as connecting more fully with our own spiritual natures. So what I'm going to do on the show is talk to people in the community and beyond about their spiritual journeys and things that they offer that you may not be aware of. So we're happy that you're joining us tonight. Thank you for being here, and welcome to Spiritual Connection. So my guest tonight is Brook Packard. Welcome to Spiritual Connection, Brook.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, I'm really happy you could join us tonight. So I'm going to read a little bit about you that you gave me, so everybody in the audience will get to know you a little bit before we start.
Sounds good.
All right. So Brook is an educator, she's a musician, and a storyteller. She has taken her love of story, her own challenges with sleep, and her experience as a liturgist, is that how you say it? Liturgist, to create Sleepytime Club. And this is a resource that gives families a nurturing bedtime ritual. Wow, sounds awesome. So Brook believes that bedtime gives us all an opportunity for self-care. I never thought of it that way. As well as connection, my core value, and spiritual practices every single night. And that if everyone practiced peaceful bedtime routines, we could change the world. That sounds amazing. I can't wait to hear more about that.
I look forward to sharing that.
Yeah. But before we do, I'd like to ask everybody to start by just sharing a little bit about your spiritual journey, how you got to where you are, maybe how you got interested in what you're doing, anything you want to share.
I grew up in a family that really believed in nothing, and I always had a belief in God, spirit, a hand at my back. I would read books and stories, and my family thought I was a little nuts. They were very empirical. You know, what existed in this world was there. I went to a summer camp that had a beautiful Sunday chapel service up in the mountains of New Hampshire, where we'd go down and we'd hear, that's where I heard, you know, Bible stories at first and introduced prayer, and it was, the sermons were always very sort of behavioral oriented, like listen to your counselors and keep your bunk clean. And then the person who ran the camp and gave them would always say, and this beautiful Squam Lake looks a lot like the Sea of Galilee. And I believed it, even though it doesn't at all. But I loved the singing. You know, I was a very creative child, and I loved to sing, and I just sort of lived in a different kind of world. And then over the years, that evolved to being involved with the church. As a teacher, a singer, I led bands and created liturgies, which are just really an opportunity to open a space to experience the divine. I met my husband there, who is a Episcopal priest and a retired bishop, and that's been a fascinating journey. And we can talk about that later if you want. And we have a lot of substantial discussions in our life about the meaning of everything, the presence of spirit, the presence of this other universe that's always with us. I consider myself de-churched. I gave it 20 years of my life as staff, volunteer, spouse of a bishop, and it just wasn't working for me anymore. So I have but I learned a lot with the teachings of the church in terms of contemplative practices, something called Lectio Divina, which is a way of reading any kind of writing that's sort of ruminatory and opens up, again, a space to connect with spirit. So that's really, I practice that. I practice it every day, every night.
Yeah. So it sounds like you made it more personal for you, that you didn't really need the outward part of the church, but you kept all the things that were meaningful to you.
Yes, I did. And
Sounds like.
I have to say, working with children in the church, I found that the children are so open to spirit, and they really come with a certain knowledge into this world. And I found the church wanting to tell them what to believe rather than open up a space for them. And sometimes there was some head butting, like I remember once I was in charge of a program at a church, and the Sunday school was part of it, and there was, it was seventh grade boys and girls on a Sunday morning, all right? You can imagine that.
Yeah.
And there was a teacher who really knew everything about the history of the church. And I said, can you just take the Apostles' Creed and write down each phrase on a card and talk about, have a conversation about what this means. And I came in the room and the kids were like hanging, miserable. And he was at a blackboard talking about the Council of Nicaea and
didn't really grab them so much.
Yeah, and I think that we all need to make it personal.
Yeah, I agree with you. I had a similar experience in my upbringing where, it just didn't work for me.
Yeah.
But I knew something was missing in my life, but it took me a while to figure out that it was the spiritual connection. So it's kind of ironic that my show is called Spiritual Connection, but anyway, it's great, now to hear what other people, how they, kind of navigated their life, whether it was spirituality, there was spiritual awareness to begin with, or whether it came later in life. But as we know, we're all spiritual beings, so it's just a matter of awareness, I think.
Yes. And when does, and how resistant are you going to be? And what happens when you do resist those messages that come?
Right, and how much your family influences you, because it sounds like you were an outlier in your family growing up. Yeah. It's interesting how that works, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very funny. They still have, my older brother has come around to his own spirituality and deep meditation and prayer, and but the others, we'll see where it goes.
Right. I have 5 siblings, and I think 2 of them are highly spiritual, and one of my sisters, she goes so far as to just it doesn't even exist. There is
really?
There's no spirit, there's no God, there's no, we're just whatever we are physically. So anyway, we have some interesting conversations.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that part of your life. And so how did you get interested in what you're doing now? This really is fascinating.
Well, it's I think everyone hits that spiritual place through a challenge. All of a sudden you hit a health challenge, or you hit a monetary challenge, or a relationship challenge, and you follow all the rules and it's not working. And at some point you have to engage in those spiritual principles, which we can talk about later. But for me, I had a huge sleep challenge, and it wasn't working at all. I went from doctor to doctor to doctor, to hoping they'd give me a pill. I was very lucky that they didn't. And and they all told me the same thing. They all said, go to bed at the same time, get up at the same time, connect with your circadian rhythms, eat at the same time, get out in sun, all those sort of practical sleep tips. And one was get a bedtime routine. And I realized in retrospect that my sleep was suffering after my daughter outgrew her bedtime routine together. That she lasted pretty long, like middle school, where we would read together and hold hands and say a prayer and release the day into night. And then when she did that, I just stopped doing it for myself. Wow. I was just doing, whatever.
So her routine was your routine, and then there was no routine.
And then there was no routine.
Okay.
So it became a matter of building that back up. And then the idea for providing families with a routine came from my work as an early childhood music specialist, which I'm always about as a teacher, no matter what I'm teaching, it's making myself obsolete. I figure that's my job, you know. So I would meet with families and they go, if only we could sing like you, or if only we could. I go, you can. You are the most beautiful voice in the world to your child. So I just thought, wouldn't it be great? I mean, I knew how to put together stories and songs and poems for bedtime. Wouldn't it be great to give people resources so they could do that for themselves? So that's really where it was born, kind of combined both. And my work as a liturgist fell into that because I had spent so many years creating a space through music and word for people to go on a little journey, you know.
Okay, so you just brought all of your kind of background and your skills together and then created this new, you brought it into being, really.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, I just sort of downloaded, so there was a little spirit in that too.
Okay. Well, you had a little help from your friends.
Yeah, a little help from my friends.
Well, that's cool. And so tell me what it is exactly that it is and what people need to know about it.
Well, the Sleepytime books are really illustrated storybooks that give children a journey to sleep.
Okay.
So the stories, you know, it starts out with cue phrases. It starts out with a song that affirms that every child is a child of light. Then there's a poem with touching, because you can only do this little piggy for so many nights in a row. And it also came from parents like, what do I sing? What stories do I tell? Then there's a story in the story. There's a mindfulness practice called Put the Day to Bed. And everything is recorded so that you can leave behind the playlist and just say, and it's a way of staying in the room. It becomes a sort of auditory transitional object for the children. So it's really like a little mini liturgy with different themes every month. So
it's a club, so people belong, and then they receive this every month?
Yeah,
like
they receive
Book of the Month Club,
it's a Book of the Month.
Liturgy of the Month Club.
Yeah, right. A Book of the Month and an Album of the Month Club just for bedtime.
Wow.
So that's really what it is.
I didn't realize that's how it worked. Okay, that's really cool.
And then there's a journal that I've created that gives kids, because we know how important journaling is to help with sleep and our own spiritual practices.
Out of our head and into somewhere else.
Right.
Release that energy. Yeah. So what ages does it cover? Is there something for different ages, or how does that work?
It's sort of a pocket of 2 to 7 year olds. And that's really, and then families can connect. So, because I know working families, even families that don't, where they're not working, bedtime is just kind of a nightmare. It's like, right? And one of my things, Sleepytime Club aside, is bedtime is something we all do every single day, all of us. And what we're doing doesn't necessarily support sleep.
Right. Especially now with this, with our devices.
Oh, yeah. That's a huge...
The electronic aspect of it is, from what I've read, it's not a good way to wind down your day because it stimulates your brain with the light,
Yeah, the blue light,
then
there's just there's no connection, again, between parents and children. There's no sort of affirming that this is a transition we have to make. And I see, and then there's also parents, I'm very concerned about the sort of mommy wine meme that's out there. Like, you've got to have a lot of wine to parent, and there's a lot of moms, you'll just see it on Instagram.
Like a little escapism kind of.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, the kids are in bed, now I'm going to have, an entire bottle of wine because I deserve it. And then, because I've been there, believe me, I've self-medicated. And it doesn't work. And so you do that, then you go, oh my gosh, I got to get up in the morning. I know, I'll wear the same clothes I wore, that I need to wear to walk the dog and to save time in the morning.
Yeah.
And no one benefits.
Yeah.
So I think when we treat bedtime as a sort of safe space, ritual rather than a habit, and treat that intentionally, and put in all the stuff that the medical experts tell us help with sleep, and make it a ritual, then sleep will follow. And we'll also think of this, we'll have all these families, and they don't have to get my books, they just have to practice this.
Right,
I believe everyone is going to be better rested, and they'll know it's a connection to spirit, it's a connection to this other world that
into our higher
surrounds us.
selves and what we can accomplish. I mean, sleep is such an important. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, the research on sleep and how important it is? Or
Well, it's, I feel like that's out there so
Okay.
much, but I think what interests me as I was preparing for this was that sleep is such a metaphor for spirituality. It's, in the first place, you're literally dealing with consciousness, right? There is thinking that perhaps there is no such a state as sleep, but that we're always sleeping, or maybe, what is reality?
Yeah, well, that's a whole nother topic, right?
Yeah, that's a whole other topic.
Interesting.
And I think when we get ready, when we prepare for sleep, a lot of things happen that are very spiritual principles, like sleep is a moment of grace. It is available to us. It's always there.
Well, it's also surrender.
Yes, that's exactly. It is surrender.
Yeah, and you have to have some element of faith in that.
Exactly.
That we'll wake up tomorrow, right?
You're reading my notes. Yeah, no, it's a leap of faith that everything's going to be okay, and that we're going to surrender to this not waking consciousness, or maybe it is waking.
And then how does the dream world factor in?
That's a whole other thing.
That is a whole other topic.
Yeah,
for
but
sure.
I don't. I mean, you would, I think, know more about that from. There's all sorts of theories on.
A lot of people are
dreams.
very up on that, and it's not one of my areas of expertise,
Yeah.
actually. But it's interesting that we're talking about this because just recently I've been paying more attention to my dreams, and I've tried to be more conscious of remembering them. And I haven't gotten to the step where people say, well, you either have a recorder or you write it down
Right.
the second you wake up. I haven't done that, but I usually will spend a few minutes before I jump out of the bed. I'll try to spend a few minutes just reconnecting with what I remember.
Yes.
And just listening, and I was talking to another guest about intuition earlier, and just trying to tune in, like, is there a message here? What, I don't try to interpret it, because I think that's an art in itself, dream interpretation. Seems very complicated. Maybe it's not, if I looked into it.
Yeah, I was reading a book on the history of dream, what do they call it, incubation.
Oh.
And it's an old, thousands of years, many different cultures practiced it in different ways, but literally you would go to a sacred space with the intention of incubating a dream to answer a problem.
I do remember hearing something about that. I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, and then there were interpreters who were gifted at it. And
Yeah.
I think, I always rejected those interpretations, because it's like, I'm not going to open a book and pick one from column A and one from column B. It seems like way too
seemed a little
personal.
bit that
Yeah.
way. But I have found through my whole life, though, that somehow, and I don't think I was conscious of it or remembered the dreams, but somehow it processed things for me.
Yes, yeah.
Like whatever it was, whether it was an issue or something I was noodling with or thinking about or bothering me, and it just seemed to be very effective at processing whatever that was.
Yeah, I think there's all sorts of neurochemical theories. I mean, there's even one of the insufficient sleep long term. I mean, besides short term, it's like you're not going to be able to regulate your moods. You're not going to be able to focus. You're not going to be able to eat, reasonably. Your partner will be miserable because you'll be cranky. Yeah. But long term, its lack of sleep is related to cancer and dementia, and so there's a direct correlation between the potential to get Alzheimer's or dementia through lack of sleep. But that whole neurochemical bath, I call it the Roomba in your brain. It sort of cleans everything up. And I think it psychologically does help us process on a healing level that's not so analytical,
That's key too. And it's not available during the day in our waking moments. It's just not.
No, I love that practice you do in the morning. There's a wonderful practice called deep soul writing, and a wonderful book by Janet Connor called Writing Down Your Soul. And
I've heard that. I haven't read it. Okay.
It's a fantastic, and she talks about the theta waves and just staying in that moment of listening.
Yeah, it's like right between waking and sleeping.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's strong messages there.
What's the book again for our audience?
It's Writing Down Your Soul by Janet Connor.
Thank you.
And it's just a deeply spiritual practice, and there's a lot of science in the book. And so sleep, I think, affords us a built-in opportunity to do all our spiritual practices, to set up rituals, to set up intention, to meditate, pray, get in touch with another reality that's maybe more real than what's out there.
Yeah, it's also, for me, it's a great time to to pray as well. Usually at night, sometimes in the morning, but it's also to express gratitude.
Yes. It's in fact, there's a practice I have when I can't sleep, because that will happen too.
Yes,
you have to surrender to the sleep as well as to the not sleep. But there's a practice I do that it always puts me to sleep. And the other thing about wakefulness is interesting. We didn't always sleep historically, human beings, 8 hours at a time. No. We would wake up.
Yeah, I was reading something about that recently. There was like finite periods of time, like cycles, where you would sleep, then you'd be awake for 2 or 3 hours, then you'd sleep.
Yeah.
But this was a long time ago.
It was.
I don't think that's going to work in this day and age.
No, because we have the electric lights all the time.
Yeah.
But there's an interesting spiritual phenomenon that in some cultures is called the hour of the wolf. And it's, and I know people who experience this, and I've experienced this, and it's 4 a.m. It's up, for some reason, it's always 3:30, 4 in the morning. You get up and you just can't sleep, and it's not insomnia, it's different.
Well, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's 3 a.m. is what I've read, and it was a book called Brain Rules.
Oh,
it's
cool.
all about your brain, and in that I learned that it's about our whole system and our hormones and everything. And the way they described it was there's two different parts that are kind of at war with each other, the waking set of hormones and the sleeping set of hormones. And during the day, they're basically, the waking ones are winning the war, and at night, the sleeping ones. But there's one point in time where they're at equilibrium, and they kind of, there's a shift, and it's 3 a.m.
Interesting.
The waking ones want to pop up, and at 3 p.m., the sleeping ones want to pop up. So, why are you drowsy at 3 p.m.?
Yeah.
It's not only because of that huge lunch you just had or whatever. It's because of this. And the same thing at 3 a.m. when you wake up. So now, occasionally, I do wake up at 3 a.m., and if I looked at the clock, it would be 3. But I don't look at the clock anymore once I learn this.
Good for you.
I just go, must be 3 a.m. Now I could go back to sleep.
That's
and it's
really
like you
interesting.
just tell yourself that's what it is. And it doesn't last very long.
Yeah. That's really fascinating about the hormones. See, I'd also heard that it was there was, it's a time when you go outside and pray or commune with spirit and then go back to bed.
Like historically? Or
Yeah, or I heard about a rabbi, for example, that would wake up at 3, 4 in the morning, and he would walk his village and intercess for everyone living in the house, and then go back to sleep and sleep soundly until the morning.
Yeah, well, that works.
Yeah, that works for me.
I guess the key thing is not to think, like you were saying, it's not insomnia. So you don't have to get up and do something, because then that would wake you up more. Like, go watch TV or something like that. Yeah, they do. Well, the recommendation is if you do wake up and you can't, don't lie in bed and freak out about how you're not getting enough. What is it? Someone says, I'm going to mangle the quote, that the insomniac's surest time to fall asleep is right before waking up, because then they don't fight it. Because then they're just relaxed. Right. Yeah. So if you do, when I do feel those nights, because they happen, no matter how much you control, and actually that's another reason why sleep is so spiritual. It's really a matter of courting it and a matter of accepting it. You can't be oppositional with sleep. You can't, the can't war on sleep. It. Right, you can't control it, but you can welcome it and make it your friend. And so it's recommended you get up, you get out of the bed,
and you read, don't watch TV because of that blue light, and also hyperstimulation, hyperconsumption of energy in whatever form. And I can usually fall asleep, immediately, like in 20 minutes. I just go up, create a secondary ritual. That's an insomnia kind of ritual, and then go back to sleep.
Okay.
So
that's good. You have that as like your backup.
That's my back. Yeah, that's my backup.
So did you consider yourself to have insomnia before, or it was not really?
Yeah, I would. It was that torment, and I think a lot of it's like, there's a lot of factors in that. It was just not being aware of what I was eating, my attitudes, my negative thoughts, busy brain, just like thinking and stressing and anxiety, and one of the, I've never told this story before. We were about to go on to look at colleges with my daughter, and I had this theory that the farther we went to the Midwest, the more we'd knock off the tuition, therefore her debt, which turned out to be true.
Makes sense.
So we made a family vacation of it and rented an RV, which was just nutty.
How fun is that? Lost in America.
Yeah, it was. It was that Albert Brooks moment. So and I'm totally panicking because it's like, now where do I go? If I have my insomnia moments, I know I shouldn't stay in bed obsessing. So I had this theory, and I had all these self-guided hypnosis recordings, which made me more anxious because it involved like you're walking down a golden staircase, and there's a bed at the bottom, and there's 10 steps, and it'd be like, I'm on step 7 and I'm still awake, right? It'd be like totally torn with anxiety. So I said, you know what, as long as I'm going to be awake, I'll just rip a bunch of audiobooks and put it on my MP3 player, so at least I'll learn something. So it would hit, and I would put in my earphones, not to disturb anyone, and I was asleep like that because there was no goal. It was just some calming voice talking me to sleep.
So you found out what works for you.
Yeah, I was open to that. Yeah. I can tell you those guided meditations did not work. They did.
No, I mean, they must work for somebody, but it's great that you had that, that awareness.
Yeah.
That you could do that. That's funny. Well, it's great that you're doing what you're doing for so many people now.
Thanks.
And having that be accessible, and so we're going to have, so people can contact you through your website.
Yep.
Obviously, and either just find out do you have stuff on there about suggestions for them, and they can, like what we've been talking about, kind of?
Yeah, I have a blog that talks about habits and sleep and parenting,
cool.
but I also have a freebie, and then I have a newsletter that also talks about different things I'm learning about sleep and habits. But I have a wonderful freebie, which is a guided meditation for kids called Put the Day to Bed.
Oh, nice.
And it comes with an illustrated booklet you can print at home.
Cool.
So
I encourage everybody to look at your website.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here tonight, Brooke. It was fun talking to you. And
same here.
I learned so much.
Well,
really cool.
Thank you.
And thank you, our audience, for being here. We're really happy to have you on Spiritual Connection. And I'm your host, Katie Augustyn, signing off. Good night and blessings.